Here's a quiet strip of desert, sand, wind, a border fence. Nothing unusual, but underneath this ground, something has been moving for over a decade. Not on the surface, not where anyone could see it. Somewhere below, tunnels stretch for what intelligence reports describe as hundreds of kilometers. Most were never meant to be found. Israel built machines that claim to listen to rock itself. Sensors buried deep in the earth. Radar built to search downward, not outward. Reports say some tunnels went deeper than anyone expected, far deeper than early detection systems could reach. That gap between how deep men could dig and how deep machines could see became the whole war. Soil doesn't scream. It doesn't confess. It just sits there, silent, holding what's buried in it, until someone builds something patient enough to make it. This is the story of how a nation tried to outlisten the ground itself. The story starts in the south of Israel, farming towns, quiet kibbutzim, fields that had been worked for generations. In 2014, that quiet broke. Soldiers patrolling near the Gaza border began noticing something strange: faint vibrations, odd shifts in the dirt, sounds that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. At first, commanders dismissed it as wind, machinery, old pipes settling underground, but the reports kept coming. Then, during a military operation that summer, Israeli forces found the first confirmed tunnel, then another, then dozens more. Concrete-lined shafts, ventilation shafts, rooms carved out like small underground bunkers. Some stretched for over a mile, crossing straight under the border fence. One officer, walking through a tunnel for the first time, later said it didn't feel like a hole in the ground. It felt like a hallway, built, planned, reinforced. Engineers were stunned by the scale. This wasn't a handful of smugglers digging with shovels. This was infrastructure. By the end of that operation, the military said it had located and destroyed 32 tunnels. 32. But intelligence officers had a harder question waiting for them. If they found 32 by accident, through patrols and firefights and luck, how many more were still down there, running silent, undiscovered? Nobody had an answer. And that uncertainty terrified people more than the tunnels themselves, because it meant the ground beneath an entire border region could no longer be trusted. Something had to change. And what came next wasn't a shovel. It was a machine built to listen to stone. Engineers were given a strange assignment: build something that could hear through rock, not metal detector, not cameras, something deeper. Israeli defense firms turned to an old idea, borrowed from earthquake science: seismic sensors, devices that pick up tiny vibrations traveling through soil and stone. The theory was simple: digging makes noise, even quiet digging. A pickaxe striking, a drill grinding through limestone, footsteps on a packed dirt floor 20 meters down. All of it sends faint tremors upward through the ground, like ripples under a still pond. Bury enough sensors, researchers said, and you could feel a tunnel being. One geologist working on early tests described it differently. He said the ground doesn't stay silent. People just aren't listening. The first prototypes were crude, devices about the size of a soda can, buried in shallow pits along the border. They picked up vibrations, yes, but also trucks, tractors, wind against loose rock. The system couldn't tell the difference between a man crawling underground and a goat walking overhead. Reports say it took researchers over a year to teach the machines what digging actually sounds like. Not just noise, pattern, rhythm, the rise and fall of a human hand at work. Slowly, the false alarms dropped. Then, one testing night, something changed. A sensor picked up movement in an area with no known tunnels, no prior activity, no warning. Just a steady, patient vibration, moving forward beneath the earth. Engineers stared at the readout, because whatever it was heading straight toward Israeli territory. The vibration didn't stop. For hours, engineers watched it crawl forward on their screen. Slow, deliberate, alive. Military officials were alerted immediately. Ground units moved into position along the suspected path, waiting for confirmation before acting. Everyone assumed the same thing: another tunnel, another crew of diggers working toward the fence. But when specialized units finally traced the signal and broke into the space below, something didn't add up. There were no diggers, no fresh tools, no footprints in just an old shaft, one nobody had on record, partially collapsed and abandoned years earlier. The vibration hadn't been a person at all. It was the tunnel itself, settling and shifting underground, mimicking the exact rhythm of human digging. For the engineers, this was worse than finding an active crew. It meant the system couldn't yet tell the difference between a threat and an echo. Reports from that period describe growing frustration inside the research teams. Every false positive cost time, manpower, and trust, and every real tunnel that slipped through cost something far greater. Because by then, intelligence assessment suggested the tunnel network wasn't shrinking. It was expanding, reaching further, and, in some places, reportedly going deeper than the sensor's effective range. One engineer later admitted the fear that kept him up at night. It wasn't the tunnels they were finding. It was the certainty that for everyone they mapped, others were being dug just below where their machines could still hear them. The ground wasn't just hiding tunnels anymore. It was learning how to hide from the very tools built to expose it. This wasn't the first time a nation had faced an enemy it couldn't see. Decades earlier, along the border between the United States and Mexico, authorities discovered smuggling tunnels stretching hundreds of feet, some reinforced with concrete, lighting, and rail systems for moving cargo underground. Investigators at the time admitted something unsettling. Most of those tunnels weren't found through technology at all. They were found by accident, a tip, a collapse, a truck sinking into soft ground above a hidden shaft. One American security researcher, after studying the problem for years, said it plainly, "Soil is very good at keeping secrets." The comparison struck a nerve with Israeli engineers, because if a wealthy, technologically advanced country like the United States still struggled to reliably detect what was buried beneath its own soil, what made anyone think Israel could solve it faster? There was a pattern here, and it wasn't comforting. Tunnels, throughout modern history, kept outpacing the tools built to find them. In Korea, in Vietnam, along smuggling routes worldwide. Each time, the offenders believed new sensors or new radar had finally closed the gap. Each time, the ground proved them wrong. For the teams working the Gaza border, this history didn't offer reassurance. It offered a warning. Because if this was a pattern rather than an isolated failure, then no single sensor, no single wall, was ever going to be the final answer. Something bigger would be needed. And in a research lab outside Tel Aviv, a small team was about to propose something that even their own colleagues thought sounded impossible. The proposal was simple to describe and brutally hard to build. Stop relying on one method. Layer everything together, seismic sensors, ground radar, electromagnetic mapping, into a single system that could cross-check itself in real time. Engineers called it a multi-layered approach. Soldiers just called it the smart wall. By 2021, after years of testing, setbacks, and reportedly billions of dollars in investment, Israel announced the barrier along the Gaza border was complete. A physical fence above ground, a sensor network below it. Officials described it as the first system of its kind in the world. But even those who built it were careful with their words. No system, they said, offers perfect certainty underground. Some tunnels, according to later reports, were dug deeper than early sensors could reliably reach, forcing continuous upgrades to the network long after it was declared finished. Whether every tunnel along that border has been found remain, even now, officially unconfirmed. What is confirmed is this: the gap between how deep a man can dig and how deep a machine can hear is the reason this entire technology exists. Rock never volunteers its secret. It only gives them up to whoever is patient enough and precise enough to ask the right way. Israel didn't build a way to see through solid stone. It built a way to make the ground finally speak. Somewhere beneath that border tonight, the sensors are still listening. So here's the real question. If a fully modern military can spend a decade and billions of dollars just to partially trust its own ground, what do you think is still moving beneath it, quietly, right now? Let us know your theory in the comments. And if stories like this pull you in, subscribe for more.